Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back for another virtual concert. It's been 2 weeks since the last one, and I had a little trouble deciding what I was going to do this evening, but I just wanted to do a concert of authentic ragtime music, and I've done concerts where I played music from different geographical areas. Ragtime really started in the Midwest, so that's the name of tonight's concert, Midwest Ragtime. I've done St. Louis Ragtime, Chicago, even Kansas City. Tonight's going to be a bit of all of them. Of course, you'll hear the music of Scott Joplin, the classic ragtimers, but also the Tin Pan Alley ragtime writers and some of their ragtime songs. What am I starting with? Starting with one of the really, it's a ragtime classic. Not a classic rag in the style of Scott Joplin, but it's a ragtime classic that came out of Iowa in the Midwest. This was written by a pharmacist from a little town called Oskaloosa, Iowa in 1901. So he named it off the shelf behind him, Carbolic Acid, a Hot Rag, 1901. Thank you very much, everybody. Carbolic Acid, a Hot Rag. Already got over 100 listeners here on YouTube. That's awesome. Thank you, folks. Yes, I did get my hair cut. It's been very hot here in Durango. Harry Traxler has joined us here on Facebook. Jim Moritz, thanks for joining me, guys. David Dewey, no, YouTube's working fine from what I can see. Oh, no way. There's a young man I just met in the Diamond Bell this week who's listening on my YouTube stream. Glad you could join us. Well, I got a request prior to tonight's concert for a rag. Even though it's about the Deep South, it's really from the Midwest. That's the theme of tonight's concert. And it was written by a band leader from Chicago. This is the first piece of music ever published with rag in the title, 1897. Here's the Mississippi Rag, which was written in Chicago, Illinois. Go figure. The case with this is that a lot of the ragtime rhythms, the early blues and even jazz came out of the Deep South, but authentic ragtime piano really was at its height in the Midwest, and that's where the great rags were written, and this is one of them, the Mississippi Rag. That's a Mississippi rag. Thank you, folks. First piece of music ever published with ragtime in the title. Now, there are these academics who have argued that it's not really ragtime because it's not syncopated enough. It's more like a march. I still think it counts as the first published rag. That's my opinion. Oh, that's wonderful. This is Corbin on YouTube. He says, Adam, I'm going to take lessons now because you inspired me so much. I loved watching you play and I'm going to do piano now. That sounds wonderful, for heaven's sakes. Well, that's the kind of thing that makes what I do all worth it. It's all worth it. That's very true. Well, thanks for joining me, everybody. Tonight's concert is called Midwest Ragtime. I'm going to play one more for you, and this is important because more than anywhere else, ragtime, authentic ragtime piano music came from Missouri. And Scott Joplin lived in Sedalia, Missouri, and then moved to St. Louis. And this one, however, is not by Joplin. It's written by Tom Turpin, who's been nicknamed the father of St. Louis ragtime. Of course, whenever you play classic rags, St. Louis is the city that is in the background of this music. And this one is the St. Louis rag, written for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition by Tom Turpin in 1903, St. Louis rag. St. Louis rag. Thank you very much, folks. Yes, it has been extremely hot here in Durango. I only have window air conditioners in this house, so I blast them on high with some fans blowing for an hour or two before I play the virtual concerts, and it's usually pretty tolerable in my living room by this time of the day. I saw some tips in the YouTube chat. Thank you so much for sending those. I always remind folks that I do accept virtual tips for these performances. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, and every little bit is helpful to my career. It helps me make a living playing this music that in many cases is well over 120 years old. I love to do it, and your support has been much appreciated now that I've been doing virtual concerts for well over 6 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long. And I'm always happy to play requests. Send in the requests on the chat. I'm looking at YouTube right now. We're up to 152 listeners. That's amazing. Thank you. Only 21 on Facebook. Oh, Marilyn Schoon and Bill, they're in Columbus, Ohio. No kidding. Well, that is fitting. I'm not sure. I don't think I know any rags written in Ohio, though. Go ahead and send in the request, folks. Just keep in mind that the theme for tonight's concert is Midwest ragtime, authentic ragtime, Tin Pan Alley rags, stuff along those lines. I guess while I'm waiting for the first couple of requests to come in, I'll go ahead and play some classic rags. I want to do at least one piece for you tonight by the great Scott Joplin, and I really think he had a gift for melody that was unlike anyone else in the history of American music. He was from the East Texas, Texarkana area, and then again lived in Missouri, but the rhythms came from the Deep South, but the great classic rags came out of the Midwest. And so here's one, I believe, they started writing this when they still lived in Sedalia, Missouri. This was written by Scott Joplin and his piano student, Arthur Marshall. They started working on it in 1899 and completed it, and the music was published in St. Louis in 1900. At least that's what you can hear on the interview that Traeger Tishner did with Arthur Marshall. Now, anyhow, here is the great Swipesy Cakewalk, the first piece that Joplin wrote, or rather had published that we know of, after Maple Leaf Rag, from 1900, Swipesy Cakewalk. you very much. Swipes a Cakewalk by Scott Joplin and Arthur Marshall. We'll hear a little more from Marshall in a bit, but let me read the chat here and see if I can find any requests. Oh, I see an interesting request here, and it's been seconded, so I think I'll go ahead and play it. Nick Taylor wants to hear Echoes from the Snowball Club. And this is very appropriate for tonight's concert because this was written in Detroit, Michigan. Once again, Midwest ragtime, and I may end up playing a number of waltzes tonight, but that's always okay. This one I think is probably the greatest of all the true ragtime waltzes. And no, I don't include Joplin in that. I guess Bethina's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but this one's my favorite. And it's neat because it's different than Joplin. This came out of Detroit, Michigan in 1898. It's called Echoes from the Snowball Club, written by Harry P. Guy. you very much. That's Echoes from the Snowball Club, my very favorite ragtime waltz. I've loved that piece of music for a long time. In fact, I used it as the title of my first CD when I was 13 years old. And I really don't remember why, except I just liked it, you know. I see some good requests. Yeah, I'll certainly play them. In fact, I see a request from my friend in France. And of course, even though she's in France, she wants to hear the Kansas City Blues. Let's do that next because it's a little bit different style of music. It has a blues flavor to it. I do try and add variety in my concerts. So here by Udi Bowman, the itinerant pianist, the same man who wrote 12th Street Rag, is the Kansas City Blues from 1916, I believe. And the first section of this is almost the same as W.C. Handy's Yellow Dog Blues. Listen real closely. It's what you would have called a floating folk strain in those days. This is the Kansas City Blues. Thank you, folks. Kansas City Blues, a little bit of early blues for you, which of course in those days was pretty similar to ragtime. But you can hear there's a few more blue notes, a few flatted thirds and sevenths. That's the difference. Well, I'm getting lots of great requests tonight. I will try and get to as many of these as I can, folks. Let me see what's on my list. I saw a request for Meet Me in St. Louis. I could certainly play that. This is from SMAT9255 on YouTube. Meet Me in St. Louis, please. One of my mama's faves. Oh, that's okay. The woman's name is Susan. I will play that for you. Yeah, just a second. That's very appropriate for tonight's concert of Midwest Ragtime. Meet Me in St. Louis. You know, even in those days, they didn't just play one piano instrumental after another. They would have played a waltz. They would have played a popular song, maybe something that was a little bit classical, and then the latest hits of the day. So here from 1903 or 04, I think it's 04, the St. Louis World's Fair was supposed to open in 1903. It was delayed a year until 1904. This is written by Frederick A. Mills. He went by the name Cary Mills, wrote a lot of wonderful music. I think he's underrated. He wrote At a Georgia Camp Meeting, Whistling Rufus, and also the famous song Red Wing. This is Meet Me in St. Louis, played sort of like U.B. Blake played it on the Golden Reunion in Ragtime. I play it as a waltz first and then really rag it up. So here we go. Meet me in St. Louis. Thank you very much, folks. Cary Mills, Meet Me in St. Louis. That's right. She says, it's certainly a place where I would love to go on the way to Durango. That sounds good to me. Mitch Miller Memories. Oh, I didn't know he sang that. Oh, that was Susan Mattern from Farmington. I'm sorry, I didn't, it's hard to recognize the YouTube handles. Yeah, those are friends of mine that I met in the Diamond Bell just a few weeks ago. Okay, speaking of Missouri, the home of classic ragtime, I want to play two pieces for you, which have really been among my favorites for a long time now, and they were supposedly written by the same man, Lee Edgar Settle. And the first is, I say I don't have a favorite, but I really do. I think it's XL Rag. Lee Edgar Settle, who was nicknamed Jelly, and the legend is that he also wrote the Missouri Waltz. And here is an original copy of the Missouri Waltz. I don't even remember where I got this, but I'm darn lucky to have it. If you look at the top of the music, this is autographed by the man who stole it from Lee Edgar Settle. The original title of it was The Graveyard Waltz, which is really strange. But if you listen, the verse is in a minor key. And so I think that's where the name Graveyard Waltz came in. It was changed to the Missouri Waltz. John Valentine Epple, this man, stole it from Settle by writing the melody on the cuff of his shirt. He made him play the piece over and over. This is documented in books and so forth. And that's the story of the Missouri Waltz, which came out in 1914. I'll play that first for you. And then from Sedalia, Missouri, the cradle of classic ragtime, 1903, the XL Rag. Dave Goodlaxon's listening. I know he loves this too. XL Rag. Thank you very much, folks. Those are really two of my favorite songs. They really are. Well, what else would we like? Let me check my list. I'm skipping a few things on the list here so I can play more requests for you. Getting a lot of good ones tonight. Unfortunately, I don't know Grace and Beauty Rag by heart. I could certainly play something else by James Scott. How about I do the Frog Legs Rag for you? Yeah, I think we'll do that next. Oh, I see a request on Facebook for Charles Hunter. I thought about playing some of his music tonight. Oh, one of my cousins, Waylon Barmore, is on Facebook tonight. Nice to have you with us, Waylon. Frog Legs sounds good. Okay, we'll do that. And yeah, I thought about playing Happy Little Moe's tonight too. Okay. Frog Legs first. We need to represent the other great classic ragtime writer who was from, guess where, Missouri. Carthage, Missouri, James Scott. And this was his most successful composition. It sold the most copies for the music publisher John Stark in 1906. Frog Legs Rag. You'll notice it's very similar to Maple Leaf Rag. It's in the same key, and there's a lot of similar melodic devices, that kind of thing. Here's Frog Legs. Frog Legs Rag. Thank you very much, folks. Felix, does razor blades count as a request? I'm afraid I don't think this is the best night for it. Plus, it's so hot in my house. Sorry. Yeah, I played Frog Legs for my new friend in the Diamond Bell this week. Amy just arrived. Oh, boy. Well, Carl, she doesn't miss neither one of the, I have two friends in Seattle, Washington, Carl and Amy Lundgren, who have hardly missed a minute of my virtual concerts in 6 years. Shooting the works. I can't believe I just got a request for that. I did play, I think, two of the Joseph Lamb novelty piano solos on a previous concert. It might have been called Classic Ragtime Rarities or something like that. You'd have to go back and find it. Sorry, I don't know those by heart. Okay, I think I know what I'm going to play next. My friend in France wanted to hear Hap Little Mose. And this is very fitting for tonight's concert of Midwest Ragtime because it was written in Chicago and by T.A. Duggan in Chicago. But it sounds very much like one of those authentic ragtimes, rags, from the Deep South. You know, you could just tap your foot to it, and it's a one-of-a-kind rag with a very unusual introduction, and written in 1903, but it came out of Chicago, Illinois. So here's Hap Lil Mose. you very much, folks. 200 viewers. Oh, thanks for counting, as always, Carl. That's terrific. Well, I've got so many listeners right now. Don't forget to hit the like button and share the live stream on your social media. Every little bit helps me reach new people, and that's my goal, is to continue to reach new people with this music. Tonight's concert, again, is Midwest Ragtime, and I'd like to play two pieces for you inspired by one of the most important Midwest ragtime pianists, and guess where he was from? Missouri. Isn't that funny? Columbia, Missouri. His name was John William Boone, otherwise known as Blind Boone, and his home and his piano are still there in Columbia. He really only wrote about two rags, a couple of ragtime songs, which in the very earliest days were sometimes called coon songs. Not politically correct today, but Blind Boone did write songs like that, and he sang songs. But his real area of expertise was as a classical concert pianist. His favorite composer was Franz Liszt, and he had his eyes taken out when he was 6 months old, back in the Civil War, and they said he was so good he could play any piece of music after hearing it one time perfectly. He would even copy the other person's mistakes. And that's a little bit about Blind Boone. He had one of the most amazing concert careers in history, but he wrote two instrumental piano rags. Blind Boone's Southern Rag Medley #1, and gee, what comes after that? #2. And I'm going to play #2 for you. It's my favorite. I love the first theme, which is Carrie's Gone to Kansas City, which is about Carrie Nation, who was the woman that went around chopping all the bottles of liquor with an axe at the turn of the century. And it also features I'm Alabama Bound, one of the earliest 12-bar blues strains. So here's some Midwest Ragtime from Columbia, Missouri, about 1909. Blind Boone's Southern Rag Medley #2. Thank you so much, everybody. That's Blind Boone's Southern Rag Medley #2. Now, Blind Boone died, sadly, in the late 1920s. I think it was 1927. Before he ever made any phonograph recordings, we really don't know exactly what he sounded like, but the best we can do is listen to his player piano rolls. And he made about 8 hand-played player piano rolls. And there's one of them, more than any of the others, that is just stunning. And it's a very, very old ballad that dates to 1866. It's called When You and I Were Young, Maggie. It's one of my grandfather's favorite songs. My grandfather from Texas died when I was 12. I can still remember that he loved this song. Only unfortunately, I was not yet a good enough pianist to imitate the Blind Boone version of this. So that's what I'm going to do for you now in honor of Blind Boone, who is one of the great Midwest concert pianists and ragtime composers of the turn of the century. He goes through the piece about 5 times. He plays it real slow, like a ballad, and then he plays it with the melody in the left hand, and then arpeggios in the right hand like Franz Liszt, and then like a little folk rag, and he finally attacks the piano. And I know some of you have heard me play this before, but I thought it would be great for tonight. Here's When You and I Were Young, Maggie. you and I were young, Maggie. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah. I'm going to play some piano rolls tonight. Yes, I am. Well, I hope you enjoyed, Maggie. I never get tired of that. And, you know, the piano roll is so amazing. Just imagine what it would have been like to hear Blind Boone in person, in real life. I actually spoke on the phone to his niece. I met her in Columbia, Missouri. She was what was her name? I recorded the interview, and she was about 97 years old at the time. Of course, this goes back 27 years ago. She could actually remember hearing him play. She knew him, she heard him play and remembered him very well. She said that even though he was completely blind, that he always knew exactly where he was. If they were in St. Louis or someplace like that, he would know exactly what street he was on without being asked, because he was that smart, even though he was blind. I just thought that was amazing. Anyway, it is after 7 o'clock here in Durango, Colorado, so I'm going to make my second announcement. I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. If you enjoy the music or I'm able to play a request for you, please consider sending in a small tip on PayPal or Venmo. The tip information is in the chat and the postings on all three websites. You can also send tips directly into the YouTube chat, and I appreciate that as well. If you don't trust PayPal, there's a P.O. box on my website for checks too. And I will be back as usual 2 weeks from tonight with another virtual concert. I think I've already decided what I'm going to do. I was trying to think of a new theme. A friend of mine suggested, well, why don't you play the last song ever written by such and such composer? And I thought, well, that'd be kind of hard to do. Let's change it a little bit. It's going to be called Pick a Composer. My next concert is going to be called just Pick a Composer. You pick the composer, I pick the song. And instead of, doing the request where you pick the song, you pick the composer. I think that'll be fun. So that'll be the next virtual concert on August 16th, I believe. And summer, I can only do about 2 of these a month. It's every other week. But put August 16th on your calendar. That'll be my next virtual concert. Pick a composer, and we'll do some unusual tunes, whether it's George Gershwin or Tom Breyer. That's fine, but that'll be the next one. Yeah, of course, it doesn't matter what it is. I just thought I'd do something new and fun for the next one. Now let me keep going. I'm gonna give myself a little bit of a rest and play the piano rolls. I told you Arthur Marshall would be coming back. Here's a piano roll of one of the Marshall rags. I've never played this, so this is why I'm going to play the piano roll for you. It's just a prearranged roll. And since we're doing Midwest ragtime tonight, this is very fitting. This is called Missouri Romp by Arthur Marshall. His rags have that great foot-stomping quality for sure. Missouri Romp on the Classics of Ragtime piano roll label. Roll number 168, in case anybody cares. Okay, let me rewind that roll. I'm going to play you one more tonight, actually. Like I said earlier, I try and include variety in my concerts. So instead of just another instrumental rag, I'm going to do a blues for you on a piano roll. And this is not the W.C. Handy blues style that came out of Memphis, Tennessee and the Deep South. This is blues from Chicago. They developed a unique style of blues piano playing in Chicago. A couple of piano roll artists, Jimmy Blythe and Clarence Johnson, played in this style. It's fairly unique. Jimmy Blythe, I think, was just one of the greatest piano roll artists of all time, along with Pete Wendling and a few others, maybe Max Cortlander. But Jimmy Blythe had this unique blues style, and this is a recut of one of his really interesting rolls. It's called Poor Little Me Blues. So here's a little bit of blues from the early jazz era, but from the Midwest, Poor Little Me Blues by Jimmy Blythe. U.S. Music World. Poor Little Me Blues. Jimmy Blythe, the one and only. Let me rewind that roll. All right, back to business, everybody. Well, send in some requests. Don't be shy. Got a half hour left for the concert. Let me check Facebook real quick. I have a lot more listeners on YouTube these days. Don't want to leave you guys out over here. Don't see much on Twitch either. Don't usually have many on there. Gonna have to go back to YouTube. Jim, Tennessee Rag? I don't know that. I thought about playing some Charles Hunter tonight, but that's really Southern ragtime, not the classic rags of the Midwest. In fact, got to represent Kansas City too. So let's do some music by the prolific and wonderful Charles L. Johnson. And I thought for tonight's concert, I know about a half a dozen of the Johnson pieces. I thought for tonight's concert, I would play Crazy Bone Rag. This was the first record that Johnny Maddox ever made in May of 1950, which was essentially the first successful record for the Dot label, which came out of Gallatin, Tennessee, and grew to be one of the biggest record labels of the 1950s and 60s. I'm very excited to be returning to the Cinecon Classic Film Festival this year in California, Labor Day weekend. Pat Boone will be there again. I'm really hoping to talk to him just for 2 or 3 minutes, even though he'll be swamped with people. I want to ask him a few things about Dot Records, because I'm still working on my book about Johnny Maddox, and they did know each other back in the 50s. This is Johnny's version of the piece, which includes the trio from Percy Windrick's Crab Apples. Randy Wood owned Dot Records. He was an unusual duck, I suppose, kind of an odd duck who asked Johnny to do some funny things, one of which was that he put in the trio from Crab Apples in the middle of this. But I'm playing it to represent Kansas City ragtime, the Crazy Bone Rag. Lazy Bone Rag. That's Midwest Ragtime by Charles L. Johnson. And I wasn't planning on playing Echoes from the Snowball Club tonight because I brought out another ragtime waltz that I love. But hey, why not do all of the great ragtime waltzes tonight? We did Echoes from the Snowball Club, the Missouri Waltz, and now we're going to do this one by Charles L. Johnson from Kansas City, Missouri. Although this was published in Detroit by Jerome Remick. I saw someone on the YouTube chat was from Detroit. This is called Tabasco, another authentic ragtime waltz, this time written by Charles L. Johnson, though, from Kansas City. It's funny to me that a composer in Kansas City would have music not published there. It'd be published in Detroit or New York, which is kind of funny. But outside of Scott Joplin, again, I think this is really one of the best ragtime waltzes. And as it's written, there is no introduction to the music. But Johnny Maddox wrote an original introduction for the piece. He taught it to me my first summer, 20 years ago this summer, when I started playing at the Diamond Bell Saloon, and I can still play it. So here it is with Johnny's introduction, Tabasco by Charles L. Johnson. Tabasco. Thank you very much, folks. Well, I sure appreciate the kind words here in the YouTube chat. I can't believe how many listeners I've had on YouTube tonight. 183 right now. That's amazing. Thank you, folks. Don't forget to hit the like button and put August 16th on your calendar for the next live stream from my home here in Durango. Got time for at least one more request if you want to send in some tunes, folks. Had to cover Kansas City there with Charles L. Johnson. Let me check Facebook real quick. I see a comment here on Facebook talking about the Jimmy Blythe piano roll. It doesn't sound like blues. Sounded like a rag. Yeah, well, it was upbeat, but you're hearing the blue notes. You're hearing the flat thirds and sevenths and so forth. 30 on Facebook. Well, that's better than 15. Sentimental Rag. I don't know that by heart either. I'm sorry. Here's a request from my friend, this is Mike in Colorado Springs. He wants to hear St. Louis Tickle. Let's do that. That's also very appropriate. It was on the flip side of Johnny's record of Crazy Bone Rag, but it was written way back for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, 1903. It was written under a pseudonym by Theron Bennett, another one of the great Missouri ragtime writers, and so it's called the St. Louis Tickle. Here we go. St. Louis Tickle. Thank you very much, folks. Well, that's some good Midwestern ragtime for you. I want to play one now to represent another composer, and this is George Botsford, because he was one of those Midwest composers, born way back in the 1800s. He was from Iowa, so this is sort of Iowa ragtime. I don't know where he lived when he wrote this. It could have been New York for all I know, but it probably was. But I'd like to play this to represent him as a composer from Iowa, and it's one of the real great Tin Pan Alley rags. I jazz it up quite a bit. This is the Black and White Rag by George Botsford from 1908. Black and White Rag. Thank you very much, folks. Yeah, of course, that was the theme song of the Pot Black, a British TV show, Snooker, which I think we call just pool or billiards over here in the United States. Well, thanks for listening. This is my new friend Corbin. Thanks so much for listening tonight. I'm not done yet. I have time for maybe one more request if you can all come up with something. Let me check Facebook. Well, not too much going on over here on Facebook. 27 listeners, though. I appreciate every bit of it. I have one listener on Twitch. I don't know who it is. Nola. Well, that was not written by Vincent Lopez. It was his theme song. It was written by Felix Arndt. I don't know it, actually. I know quite a few of the Zez Confrey novelties, but I've never played Nola. Just don't happen to know it. Lily Queen. I think I can play that for you. I finally committed the music to memory when I was able to purchase an original copy of it. That's fitting for tonight. It's another rag by Arthur Marshall. Scott Joplin's name is on it, but I really do not believe that he contributed much to this music because it's strictly in the Marshall style. From 1907, or I believe 07, yeah, 07. Here is Lily Queen, Arthur Marshall and Scott Joplin. very much, folks. That's some more classic ragtime from Missouri. I'm going to break my own rule here a little bit and finish the concert with a couple of songs by Joe Jordan. Now, he fits in very well for tonight's concert. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but then moved to St. Louis at the height of the ragtime era, and then Chicago in 1904, where he wrote all of the music for the Pekin Theater in Chicago. It was the first all-black owned and operated theater in the United States, and I sort of consider him a Chicago composer. In fact, I believe he lived in Chicago when he wrote these songs. They might have been published in New York, but I'm pretty sure that he lived in Chicago. It could have been New York, but I'm just going to represent him again as a Midwest composer and play for you from 1909, his most famous ragtime song, originally introduced by Ada Overton Walker. I just recently obtained the first edition of the sheet music with her picture on it, but Blossom Seeley also sang it in vaudeville for many years, and then on TV in her later years. Here's That Teasin' Rag. That Teasin' Rag. Thank you very much, folks. Famous ragtime song by Joe Jordan, one of the legendary Midwest ragtimers, which came out in 1909. And I thought it would be poignant to close this evening's concert with another Joe Jordan piece. This one I learned from Johnny. The music was never published, but he told Johnny he wrote it the same year as the Teasin' Rag, 1909. And I know if Marilyn and Bill are listening on Facebook, they usually are, that they'll be very happy to hear this. This is the beautiful, unpublished Corsica, That French Rag by Joe Jordan from Chicago. That's where he lived the longest, I suppose, as a composer. Corsica. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks for listening to this evening's concert of Midwest Ragtime. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed playing for you. Please share my live streams because I want to keep these going. It's become a big part of my career. It's fun. And I do appreciate all of your virtual tips very much. Even in the summer when I'm playing at the hotel, my job at the Diamond Bell alone is not enough to make a living on that. And I'm hoping to play some more concerts elsewhere in the future, but I enjoy doing this from home. I really do, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this evening's music. Please join me again 2 weeks from tonight, August 16th, for another virtual concert on all 3 websites. I think I'm going to call it Pick a Composer. So start thinking now. Anyone from Cole Porter to Scott Joplin. Just start thinking, and we'll do Pick a Composer next time. See you all online 2 weeks from tonight. Thanks again, and good night for now, folks.